going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We are on episode 91 as we creep closer and closer to the seemingly elusive number 100.
Yeah.
Kind of thought you never get there, but it's fastly approaching.
It's funny because, we felt the same way about 52 and...
Yeah.
What was the other book? 75.
75, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Almost at the century mark. And I have a lot of people, not a lot, but noticeable number of people that will come up to me and say that they, like new listeners, that say that they listen to the podcast and they started from episode 1, which is insane. And I tell them that's probably unnecessary. I can kind of point them in the directions of the pertinent episodes, but you think it's 45 minutes at least for every episode, essentially, because you also have the interviews, which last longer.
Yep.
So you look at it like that, and it's like, holy cow, that's a lot of listening time that people are gracious enough, I guess, for lack of a better word, to spend on us.
Yeah, there's a few people, I would say the same thing, that are new listeners over the course of the last year, especially, that say the same thing. They're like, where do I start? And I'm like, well, I mean, you can start at number 1 if you want, but that would take forever.
Yeah.
Or listen to this episode, and then you could kind of start wherever you want. At that point, you'll have a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, I just send them a list of the episodes with guests because they're the best ones.
Yeah, those are the ones that share a little more information than you and I just kind of talking with each other.
Right.
So how's things going this week training-wise?
Training has been awesome, actually. I bet you, on paper, it's the best week I've had in, I don't know, since before COVID.
Now, a lot of that's based on the fact that you actually have a fully operational home gym now with like the rack and everything. Because we talked about it last week, but it's, we've always talked about how you can make do with minimal resources, but that doesn't mean all the time that minimal resources is best.
Right. Exactly.
Just because you can doesn't mean it's optimal. So like when you have a squat rack, or not a squat rack, that doesn't do it justice, like a power rack, a Smith machine, cables now, like it makes your workout so much better just because you have a little bit more variation in what you can do.
Yes.
You don't have to, getting creative, like we've talked about before, also is good, but the ingenuity isn't necessary. You don't have to like think your way through your workout. Like, oh, I'm going to do back today. I have to figure out how I'm going to do these exercises or what exercises I'm going to do with minimal equipment, because you have it at your disposal. So it makes training less thinking, more doing.
Exactly.
Which is obviously a positive. Anytime you can do that, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm actually starting to see progress again.
Mm-hmm.
All numbers are starting to go up.
Yep.
I would say all of them are going up, except for the bench isn't back to where it was.
Yeah.
But it's really close.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would say, within a month, we'll be back to where it was. But everything else is up. Finally elapsed that. For those that are like gym guys and girls, that 405 number on the deadlift for reps, finally. There's something that happened, 2 days ago. So that was pretty awesome.
And I think it's important to note that you lost weight too.
Yes.
9 pounds?
Yeah.
About 9 pounds?
Yeah, 9 pounds so far.
So that, believe it or not, and this is for kind of explaining this for people that haven't had much experience in the gym. Whenever you do anything physical, and it's not just the gym. I mean, I hear this with fighters a lot, is when you lose weight or gain weight, it changes your leverages a ton. Yeah. So there are some lifts where gaining weight helps. So let's look at the extreme end of lifting weight, like powerlifting, where you bench, squat, and deadlift. That's how powerlifting meets work, is you squat first, you get 3 attempts to do as much as you can, then you bench second, and you get 3 attempts to do as much as you can, and then you deadlift last, and you get 3 attempts to do as much as you can, then you add your total together. So I know that there are some that with weight fluctuation affects your lifts a lot. Right. And it's not just from the obvious, like, oh, if you gain weight, you probably gain muscle, so you're stronger. It's more than that. There's leverages involved too. Like I'll talk to a lot of guys that are like super heavyweight powerlifters, and they actually enjoy having a fuller belly and almost a little bit of a gut, because when they come down to the hole of a squat, they're able to like kind of use that as leverage, either pushing against their legs or whatever out of the hole. So it makes a big difference. And then something like a deadlift, I've been told in the past from people that are a lot more experienced in that than I am, that gaining weight actually hurts.
Oh, I imagine.
Because it's more difficult to get into a position to bend over and grab the bar, so your leverages are a little bit different. I was talking with someone too, a kid named Trey, who I have been training. He's leaving actually this week to go back to Ohio State. He's an Ohio State baseball player. And when he lifts, when his team trains, they're in the vicinity in the same weight room as the gymnastics team at Ohio State. And he was telling me that they are very, very, very meticulous with their weights, and they have to stay exactly the same weight. So they work with a nutritionist, as does the baseball team, but they work with a nutritionist who calculates all of their macros for the week and basically does kind of like how I do, where it's full on nutrition consultation. Because he was telling me that and it makes sense, but you never really think about it. A little bit of weight fluctuation up or down is going to make a huge difference when you're doing multiple flips in the air for a prolonged period of time. And it's almost like scary to think, man, if you gain 5 pounds, which seems like nothing, how that might be able to throw you off, a couple millimeters, which you don't want to get hyperbolic here, but it could be life or death.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, literally.
It literally could be, yeah.
So gaining weight, losing weight, that kind of affects your training to a big degree. Some for the better, some for the worse. So when you talk about contest prep scenario, when somebody's getting ready for a show, or when they're not getting ready for a show and they're just dieting, a lot of times initially people see a drop in weight or a load when they're benching or squatting or deadlifting or lifting or whatever. And I think that some of it's physiological, like you're probably eating less carbohydrates if you're losing weight. So you're getting a little bit less glycogen stores and your muscles are a little bit flatter and may feel a little bit weaker in a sense. But I think a lot of it's mental too.
Yeah.
Like if you're losing a bunch of weight and your performance markers are going down, that's not a good sign because you're probably losing weight that you shouldn't lose. So like it's kind of discerning between losing weight and losing fat. Like everybody's goal should be to lose fat, not to lose weight. Like I have that discussion with the wrestlers often where they need to make a certain weight class in their eyes because they'll do better at this weight class. And I tell them, well, you should be concerned with losing as much fat as possible and not losing as much weight as possible. Because when you lose all the fat and you're still above the weight class, why would you intentionally lose muscle to get to a weight class?
Right.
Because your performance is going to be better here because you're hanging on and retaining more tissue. So anyway, the long and short of that is it's good to see that your lifts are staying the same while you're down almost 10 pounds.
Yeah. Then they've all went up actually this week. So everything went up by 10 pounds. Actually, my squat went up by 35 pounds. No, 55 pounds.
And you see that a lot. Like there's so
35 pounds.
There's so many myths when it comes to dieting and how it affects performance.
Yeah.
So like the one that I deal with all the time is not me personally, but people don't want to do cardio because they're afraid they'll lose all their gains, so to speak. So if you have someone who's trying to maximize the amount of muscle they can put on, they need to maximize their calorie intake and for all intents and purposes, minimize how much they're burning. And they think that if they, walk for a half hour, 45 minutes, that it's going to completely deplete all their muscle. And I can tell you from experience that getting ready for the Spartan race at the end of this month, I've been running, I'll use that term pretty loosely here. I haven't been running, but what I do is anywhere from a mile to 2 miles.
Yeah.
And I will do it on a track. So I'll walk a lap, run a lap, walk a lap, run a lap. So it's more like interval training.
Yeah.
But I've been doing 1 or 2 miles fasted in the morning every day for the past couple weeks and have not noticed any slight dip in weight. In fact, I've gone up in weight in a good way. My performance is great.
That's so good.
You need to look at body optimization. So don't really focus on, and that's, dude, as a trainer, the more and more I'm in it, the more I get to performance-based stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I know that people get kind of hypercritical, not hypercritical, but they almost even condescending towards people that do certain things if it's not what they want to do. So like bodybuilders will talk a lot of trash on CrossFitters.
Yeah.
And say, oh, CrossFit's stupid, blah, 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 you potential risk for injury. But the reality is a lot of the CrossFitters I know most of them are significantly bigger than the bodybuilders that I know that are saying that kind of stuff
Right.
to him.
Yeah.
So in that, actually, I don't want to get too far off tangent about you losing weight, because that's good. And I think we should kind of revisit that. But this kind of leads me to a point that I was thinking about this week, and thought that I wanted to bring it up on the episode. And it could be like almost our entire talking point now. Is I was training the other day, a couple days ago, with a buddy of mine, and he mentioned something about how he gets a lot of hate. And I don't like using the term hate or haters, but
Yeah.
he gets talked about a lot in his friends group, because he's younger. He's like 22, I believe, 21, 22. And he gets a lot of flack from his friends about how he's doing everything wrong with his training. So they say that he lifts too heavy, he lifts too ballistically, and he trains stupid because he's very, very aggressive when he lifts. And some of his exercises he will utilize with visually what you would call perfect form, where it's controlled and squeezing and doing everything the right way. But some of his stuff is very, very dynamic and explosive, almost like an athlete would train, but just with load.
Yeah.
So he doesn't use perfect form. Maybe he swings on some exercises and he uses extremely, extremely heavy weight. Like I said, he's only in his early 20s, 21, 22 at the absolute most. And he's squatting over 500 pounds, deadlifting over 600 pounds. Spotted him on incline bench. He was doing 315 for reps on incline. He's a strong kid, jacked kid, lean, looks the part, everything. And it was kind of interesting to me, because I see this as a reoccurring theme throughout life. It's not just the gym. It happens all the time in the gym. And to be fair, I'm guilty of it too. So I'm kind of in this guilty party. Is you often see that people will criticize criticizing the pro athlete from the stands.
Yes.
So you see people that become hypercritical of what you do. You spend too much time at the gym. You lift too heavy. That's going to hurt you. You diet too hard. That's not safe to cut calories like that. And they throw out all these things at you. And it just seems like an overwhelming majority of the time, the people that are telling you that you're doing things too extreme,
they're not doing extreme enough.
Yeah, they're people that are, I don't want to use this as a term of like humanity, like below you as a person, but they're below you in terms of what they're talking about.
Right.
So it's like, I've noticed that sometimes people who critique other people's form and say, oh, he has terrible form. It's like, well, you're saying that, but they're significantly bigger and more ripped than you are.
Yeah.
So why can you critique them if they're in a better scenario? Now, again, knowledge and application aren't really the same, especially in the gym, because someone could get big despite what they do. Mm-hmm. You could just have great genetics. So sometimes pro bodybuilders may not be the best person to listen to. So you can't always use the argument of that guy's got more muscle, so he knows more than you. Exactly. It doesn't always work like that, because every pro bodybuilder I know has a coach who's significantly smaller. Yeah. So
I tend to look at guys for their work ethic more than their size or their look.
And there's certainly some times where you can kind of look at what someone's doing and give some third-party objective feedback. Yeah, like, hey, dude, you need to take that load down a little bit. I think you're lifting a little bit too heavy. Maybe in a couple of years that's going to catch up to you. But I just, it's crazy because I see it not just in the gym. I see it everywhere. Like, I see it with money, financially. Oh, you work too many hours. You need to sleep more. You're going to stress yourself out. Well, I understand that, but on the same side, some of that is necessary for growth.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know many CEOs who sleep a lot.
I don't know any. Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality of it. I talked about on a previous episode very recently that Austin and I were talking, my coach, and he said, maybe you can't get as uncomfortable as necessary with the food. Maybe you're just one of those people where your digestion or your hunger hormone regulation, you're just not able to push past a certain threshold. And it made me think, and I took it personally.
Yeah.
And that was not the intention, or knowing Austin, maybe it was, but because you just see that a lot of times people will tell you that are successful, hey, you just have to do things maybe the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
In other people's view. If you want to be rich, maybe you don't need to sleep, or maybe you can't sleep.
Right.
If you want to push the limits and know how far your body can go, maybe you need to overtrain a little bit.
Right.
It's just, I just see that so often in all facets of life, that the people that become hypercritical of the things you do tend to be people that are below you or not as good as you in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And I do that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using this as an example for myself. I'm not saying that people critique me and I'm better than them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying I notice this third party where I see people talking about other people. Because, I mean, the reality is that I'm at the gym all day.
Yeah.
So I hear people's conversation, and I can hear so-and-so saying, oh, well, that guy doesn't, he lifts stupid, and he lifts too heavy, and he's going to hurt himself, and he trains too hard. He needs to focus more on recovery. But then the person they're talking about is significantly bigger and stronger and more ripped than them.
Yeah.
So
it's ironically not sore and tired.
Yeah. Yes. And then the other part that goes into that conversation is this gentleman who I'm speaking of and I started talking, and we started talking about how there's another side of the coin that people don't see. So he trains extremely hard, extremely hard. And this is coming from someone
who trains
extremely hard and is having a conversation with someone who trains extremely hard. So I feel like real recognize real, like we can tell our own, right?
Yeah.
So he trains extremely hard. And we said that, people don't see the other side of what goes into it. They see the hard, aggressive death training. What they don't see is him going home and eating a enormous surplus of healthy, nutritious foods, like does not cheat, eats cleaner than anybody I know at such a young age, which is phenomenal. They don't see that he gets deep tissue massage therapy regularly. They don't see that he does several hours of mobility work a week. They don't see that he makes sure that he gets plenty of sleep and he goes to bed early while all his friends are out drinking. Like, there's so many factors that go into it that it's very ironic, because they're talking about him not being able to recover, but they don't see that he's doing so much throughout the week specifically to recover.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that judgmental standpoint where you need to understand the context of what the person's doing.
Yeah.
So, and you have that happen all the time in the gym too, where you see a certain person doing something particular and you may be critical of it, but if you understand the context there's maybe very good reason why they're doing it that way.
It's wild and this happens to everybody. Not everybody, but anybody. At some point, when you get super dedicated to the gym, this happens to you, because somebody sitting on a couch or coming in to do that casual cardio 3 days a week, if they see you there every single day, they drive by and your vehicle's in the parking lot or the lights on in your home gym every single night, they automatically think you're just doing it too much. And it's like, and not everybody, but there is always somebody. And it's happened to me every gym I've been to, including my own home gym.
Mm-hmm. I remember there was a while where you and I, when we were working together for the first stint, where we were criticized, I guess I used that word, criticized, for doing things unhealthy, which was kind of hilarious to me, because the forefront of every discussion you and I have ever had is always optimize health first. Yep. That was always the number one. And I think that was more or less a compliment, believe it or not, because of how fast you were losing weight, because you were doing everything right. Your nutrition was perfect. Training, perfect. Cardio, perfect. Rest, as perfect as it could have been given your job. Like, we had all these variables accounted for, so you were losing so much weight so fast. And then the discussion that I had that kind of branched off of that was, you can, let's say we were hypothetically doing things unhealthy. Like, his calories were a little bit too low. He was doing a little bit too much cardio. Well, don't you think being 526 pounds is unhealthy too?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we're trying to get away from that. I see no problem in somebody
radical moves to get away from radical moves.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a problem to me, at least as if it's in the short term over a period of a couple months. Now, if you're doing something that's unhealthy for years and years and years to get away from an unhealthy habit, it could be like someone who does drugs like heroin and then they turn to anabolic steroids as a way to kind of escape that. could be beneficial, I guess, in a sense, because there's not the acute problems, but there's the chronic problems where then you could abuse the anabolic steroids and then you wind up in a super unhealthy position to begin with that you were. So I think that you always have that where people are going to be critical of what you do and how you do it. And I guess the big takeaway message with that is to try not to do it yourself, because I'll find myself doing that sometimes. Like, oh, that guy could be better if he did this, or if he did. Well, you don't understand the context.
Yeah, you don't know what he's doing when he's not here.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Unless you're driving through the town and you're seeing him pulling in and out of fast food joints. And then even then, I was on the phone with you last night in a fast food joint line because I was getting my wife a chili from Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
So, you just don't know. I mean, I guess that was my way of saying don't judge a book by its cover. Crack the pages a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then, like, it's wild how I guess I don't want people to get discouraged whenever they catch those like negativity in the gym.
Yeah.
Because
yes, it sounds corny, but you gotta stay true to yourself, right?
Yeah, for real. Because like if you're doing that, if you're going extreme enough that somebody's talking about you, it sounds like you have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Follow your plan. Stick to the plan, stick to the process, and it'll work.
Yep. And then I think that if you can do things, once you get to the point, like I've heard Dorian Yates talk about this before. For those that don't know Dorian Yates, he's a 6-time Mr. Olympia, one of the greatest bodybuilders to ever live. And Dorian, more or less, I'm going to paraphrase here, was talking about true freedom is not caring what anybody says.
Exactly.
He says it in a little bit more vulgar language than I did. But once you don't care what people think about you, that's true freedom.
Yeah.
At least people that you don't care about. Like, obviously, I would take my loved ones and people that I care about, I would take their opinion into account, but I don't care what anybody says about anything that I do. If I work too much, if I train too much, if I sleep too little, if I do this, if I do that, because the reality is if I'm doing anything that's not optimal in my life, I'm constantly trying to improve it.
Exactly.
Like for example, the sleep thing. I know that sometimes I don't get enough sleep. Like, I talked to my coach about that. Like, we troubleshoot those things. Like, I'm aware of it. I'm just constantly, continuously trying to fix it. I think that people like you and I too, is you don't have to tell us anything that we're doing wrong because we're well aware of it.
Yeah.
And we're trying
to have it documented. Trust me.
Yeah. Not only that, but if there's something that I'm not good at,
yeah,
not necessarily that I'm doing wrong, like, I know what my weaknesses are. I don't think you can be successful at anything unless you know the weaknesses. It's like having a debate with someone. Like if I have an argument with you, I feel like one of the things that I'm pretty good at is not arguing, but debating people or having like thorough discussions from someone of an opposing view, because I do my best to know the opposing view better than the person that's backing that argument.
Right.
Like if you and I are arguing over 2 football teams, you think this one's better, I think that one's better. I'm going to know everything about the football team you're defending, so I can kind of poke holes in your argument, number one. And number two, I know what you're coming at me with before we even have it. So, like, when it comes to yourself, like, I know what my weaknesses are. You don't have to tell me. I have already understood what my weaknesses are to a much higher degree than you do.
It's that Eminem mindset from 8 Mile. Tell me something I haven't already told you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've done that this whole time because I knew, in my whole life I've dieted. We've talked about that. So like I knew when I was starting and I knew I was serious that I had to be raw and real, because as soon as people realized that I was going to be trying to actually lose weight and I was seriously trying, there was going to be so much negativity.
Yeah.
That I just had to let it all hang out and tell everybody every little dirty secret. Because then what can you tell me, honestly, that you're not repeating what I've already said? Yeah. So.
Or that you've already heard.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at that point, it just becomes futile for anybody else to try to convince you otherwise.
Right.
So that's, I think, a good place to take a commercial break. So we'll kind of come full circle because we kind of ended with strengths and weaknesses. Well, we started with kind of an update on you. So let's kind of circle back to that now that we're talking about you and weight loss and all that stuff. So we'll go to a commercial break and we'll talk more when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we're back from our commercial break. Okay, so prior to the break, Justin, we talked a lot about kind of the saying that I like to use for what our discussion was the cheapest booze or the loudest boos come from the cheapest seats.
Yep.
So you got people kind of that are onlookers, not doing what you do, kind of criticizing, even though they're potentially a little bit more lazy or a little bit less talented or a little bit less hardworking or whatever it is. And they're the ones being hypercritical. And we kind of circled back to yourself. So we talked about you losing weight, and that was kind of an early discussion point when we first started, just kind of with a mini update. But let's touch on that a little bit more, because you are feeling like a new person.
Yes.
Or an old person we're revisiting, I guess.
I feel like I'm revisiting a person from a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I generically use the term "feel like a new man" just because I do it from last week to this week. It's like a completely different person.
Yeah.
And it's so bizarre the way that just eating the correct foods, exactly dialed out the right stuff, makes you feel better.
Well, look at all your lifts going up.
Yeah.
When you started eating clean for a week. I mean, now there's not going to be drastic changes within a week's time, but physiologically your body's going to respond appropriately.
Exactly.
If you give the body what it needs, it's amazing what the body can do.
With a little bit of time and effort.
Yeah.
Look out.
Truly, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit of time. That doesn't take much.
Yeah.
That's why I think that people really, really underestimate what they're capable of within certain time periods. But they have to actually do it. Because I know so many people that plan to lose 50 pounds, but they never do because they don't actually do it.
Well, I guess, I don't know. How do you look at planning to lose 50 pounds? Because if I know people that say, I want to lose 50 pounds, and that's their plan to lose 50 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have an actual plan.
I think it kind of goes back to
the roadmap.
And understanding short term will bring about long term, but long term won't bring about short term.
Exactly.
So if I have a plan to lose 50 pounds in a year, and this is just based on observation. There are some people that do it. Sometimes, oftentimes, most times, maybe 99% of the time, I see that people who want to, let's say someone wants to lose 50 pounds in a year. 99% of the time, the people who lose 50 pounds in a year are not the ones that try to lose 50 pounds in a year. They're the ones that try to lose 1 pound a week.
Yep.
Because 1 pound a week, 52 weeks a year, there's 52 pounds.
Yep.
So it just seems to me, and I've harped on this a lot, you've mentioned it, I'm sure, several times as well, that the importance lies in the short-term goals, not in the long-term goals, because the short-term will bring around the long-term, but the long-term goal setting won't bring around the short-term.
It's 100% true.
So you can have a plan to build the house, but you need the blueprint for the house. You can't just say, I'm going to build a house and start building.
Yeah.
And it's repetitive, and we touch on it all the time, but it's super, super important. That's why, so for you, when you started losing weight, I said, weigh yourself every day.
Yeah.
And we have been people that have been against that, right? Like
right.
We've said to a lot of people, it's not really the best scenario most times to weigh yourself every day. But for us, I think that's important right now, just to make sure that
the trend is our friend.
Yeah, resetting a solid diet plan. You got to make sure that you're heading in the right direction consistently. Now, you also have a level head and understand the trend too, because even though we've lost 9 pounds, right?
Yeah.
9 pounds this past week, you have almost week tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Even though you've lost 9 pounds this week, it hasn't been a linear 9 pounds. Our weight this morning was not the lowest weight that we've been, because I think we were down to 352, 51.
I think it was 350 2 days ago.
Okay.
I'll look while we're talking.
So regardless, point stands that we were not at our lowest weight right now. Every day when you wake up and weigh yourself, you're not going to be lighter than the day before forever.
Right, exactly.
For you, it didn't even last a week, but you understand what variables are at play. How much water did you consume? Did you go to the bathroom yet? Did you go to the bathroom last night? How much stress are you experiencing right now? Which is for you is a lot currently. So it's you need to just take it for what it is. But
I think it's like kind of ironic how I can anticipate the questions you're going to ask before you ask them, and when I do my update, I just answer the questions before you ask the questions.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is what's happening. This is why my hydration's been off by half a gallon this today, or I didn't sleep very good last night. My stress level's through the roof.
Now you obviously know a lot more than what I would consider, quote, a normal weight loss person, because you've done it.
Yeah.
So you understand the ins and outs, and you've worked with me before. So I kind of try to, don't want to put myself on a pedestal, but I try to teach things to people that don't understand them initially, and now it gets passed on because you're teaching people those things. But I think, despite you knowing more than most people, I would still say that those people that don't seem to know a lot, you don't have to be an exercise physiologist or nutritionist to understand why you gained weight last week or whatever. So like if someone loses, let's say 30 pounds over the course of a couple months, and then they have a week where they gain 4 pounds, you don't have to understand hormonal imbalances, stress precursors, or any of that to know why you gained 5 pounds last week. There's probably, because people will say, I don't know what happened. It's like, well, I'm sure that if you sat down and itemized this week,
somewhere.
Yeah, you probably know why that happened. So I think, and we talked about that before, I don't think people give themselves enough credit for their knowledge of how things work in the performance field of nutrition and exercise. And I think it could be an excuse.
Yeah.
Maybe people are just saying, well, because I hear that a lot. Well, I would do a diet, but I just don't know what I'm doing. Well, it's like, yeah, you do. I mean, you don't have to set up a perfect nutrition plan, but I'm pretty sure if you tell me what you eat now and I offered you $100, you could probably give me 100 ways on how to make that healthier. So you do know what you're doing to a large degree. But it's great to see you back.
Yes, and it feels good. It feels really good to be back, for sure. And like you were saying earlier, so like we've talked a lot about training with like rudimentary stuff and really old school, because that's what we had to do during the COVID lockdown, or when I first started training at home again, I back to not having equipment, and now that I do, it's nice to have, but I still like to incorporate that stuff.
Yes.
Like, I watched the Bud Jeffries that you introduced me to through social media. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I guarantee that guy has a basement full of like awesome equipment, but he chooses to train outside, and that, you know what I mean? Like, or the ability to have a basement full of awesome equipment and just still chooses to train the way he does. It's like, it's obviously working because he is a monster.
Kind of reminds me, probably going to get off topic here, but it reminds me of a quote by Mike Tyson that I saw, and he was talking about how he was getting up at 4 a.m. to run every morning.
Yeah.
And the premise of the quote was that he didn't have to get up at 4 a.m., but he did it because everybody else was sleeping, and he felt mentally that gave him a head start and a little bit of an edge. And I know that we've mentioned that
absolutely
on the podcast before, but I just think that it's pretty cool to see. I have a profound respect for people that do things the hard way, even when they don't need to. Now, there's sometimes when that's just foolishness, and you need to work smarter and not harder. But more often than not, the successful people tend to do that a lot. Either that, or they've had a long history of needing to do things hard way. So it's kind of calloused them and created someone who's a lot tougher, a lot more hardworking in the long run, or whatever. Like when I am talking to Dr. Edwin Adams, who I did his podcast, I was interviewed twice. And during the second interview, I know we mentioned this a couple months ago about the topic of a podcast. Well, we didn't really have a topic. We kind of just went in blind and started talking. And as we started talking, he hit record, and that was it. But the conversation geared its way towards resiliency. And we talked about predominantly resiliency in kids. Like, how do kids have resiliency? How do you foster that? How do you make kids tougher? Especially because it's a unique balance, because some of them come from really, really volatile home lives. and they could be very, very fragile because of that. Some students are in that situation, and that actually makes them tough. Some, it breaks them. So you have to kind of treat every kid differently. But then the conversation kind of evolved into, how do you foster resiliency in people that aren't resilient? Like, how do I build that? Like someone, let's say I'm not, okay, I'll use myself as an example. Everybody's been through hard stuff in life, difficult stuff. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, my life has not been that difficult. I haven't lost anybody in my family or any of my loved ones that aren't of age where dying is a likelihood. You know, I lost my great grandma and my grandma on my dad's side. I never knew my grandfathers on either side, so they had already passed by the time I was born. My other grandma, my mom's mom, is still alive. My mom, my dad, my brother, all of my immediate family is still living. So I never experienced any trauma. I was never poor. I had everything that I would need feasibly growing up as a kid. I never experienced any type of abuse or neglect or anything like that. So my life, for the most part, again, I'm not undermining my own life and saying that I haven't gone through stuff, because I've gone through some really difficult things that you don't really get shared, because everybody's like that. You don't just go around telling people how tough your life is. At least I don't. So if you have someone like me, how do you make someone like me tougher? Like, how do you build that resiliency? Or is it something that you just have to go through? It's just an experience thing. You just need the experience.
I think, honestly, the only way iron sharpens iron. So it's like, in my opinion, like, we've talked about birds of feather flock together, and iron sharpens iron. It's like just being with people that react well to adversity and around people, and like absorbing that information.
So you kind of see how to act appropriately.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Justin went through this, and that was really hard, so I can take it with the same amount of pursuit and the same amount of mental toughness as he did.
Or I have the ability to. You know what I mean? Like, looking at somebody else's bad situation and saying, okay, this is how they handled it. And if you perceive the way they handled it as good, then I don't want to say try to handle your situations the same, but try to keep that in the back of your mind. Like, let's what's the word I'm looking for? Like, quantify what the situation really is, because a lot of times we tend to overreact.
Sure, that's me.
You know, we all do.
Everybody,
it's not just you. You know, we all do it. Like, we all tend to overreact. So, like, anything, the dog dies, and people. I mean, when I was a kid, I cried. Now the dog dies. Oh man, it sucks. I've had this dog for 15 years. You know, I've spent a lot of money on him, and he's made us laugh, and made my kid happy, and my wife
like part
happy.
Of the family. Yeah,
it's part of the family, but it's a dog. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like. So at the end of the day, it's a dog. You're not gonna see me bawling.
Dude, I've done a lot better with that kind of stuff. Not necessarily losing a pet specifically, but just being able. I've done so much better as I've gotten older with putting things in true, proper context.
Perspective.
I wouldn't say necessarily things of sadness, but I would say things of anger. Things that would make me angry and furious before, that I've had so much more patience with as I've gotten older, and just understand, like, this doesn't matter right now. This is not going to affect me. Yep. Like, when you think about little things that happen, what I try to do is I try to, number one, do the Dr. Ryan method. And after 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever the time threshold is, if you continue to dwell on something, that's you choosing to dwell on it. If somebody, the example that we've used in the past is someone cuts you off in traffic, you get real mad. If that continues to make you mad more than a couple seconds, that is a neurocognitive choice. Yeah. You are choosing to emotionally fixate on that. You're letting that bring you down. So I've done a pretty good job of redirecting my thoughts. And the other way that I think about things is, how long will the ramifications of this be? So if I get cut off in traffic, how long is that going to affect me? Well, I hit my brakes. Everybody's safe. Okay, now this will no longer have any semblance of impact in my life going forward at all. It's done. The dog dies. Okay, I'll probably think about that periodically throughout the week.
Yep.
I wake up, go to take the dog out. The dog's not here anymore. That's very, very sad. And so you can be a little bit more upset for something like that, and it's understandable.
Yeah.
You have a significant other that passes away. Okay, that's very impactful. So you kind of have to just look at things on how long how long are the shock waves going to last for what this event really is?
Yeah, what's the ripple effect look like?
Yeah. Is it a couple hours, couple minutes, couple days, couple months, couple years? Is it a lifetime?
Right.
And I think that is one way that you can kind of gauge what your emotional response should be, in a sense. And I'm not one to tell people how they should or shouldn't feel or how something should or shouldn't affect them, especially if it's something unrelatable. I would not feel comfortable if I've never owned a dog. Now, I have owned a dog, but hypothetically, if I have never owned a dog, I wouldn't feel comfortable telling people that they shouldn't get upset when their dog dies, because I don't know what that's like. And anybody who's owned a dog know that it is pretty difficult to deal with if you have a pet that you lose, and it's emotional for a lot of people. But I wouldn't criticize if I've never been in that type of position also. So I don't know. I just think emotional response is really, really big for people in every outcome. There was a conversation. I said something on Instagram, and now I remember what it was. It came to me. I was kind of doing the racking my brain there for a minute. I said something on Instagram the other day, which I'm sure you probably saw, and some of our listeners saw, those that follow me at least. And I just typed out, "You are in control."
Yes.
Because the more and more I go about things, the more I realize, like, I am in control of a lot more than I give myself credit for, that I think that I am. You can make excuses about certain things, but ultimately a large majority of your life is because of where you have put yourself. Like, you are exactly where you want to be, whether you realize it or not. And the people that say, well, no, I'm not, I'm poor, I don't have a lot of money, or I don't live in a nice house, or I'm fat and out of shape.
What have you done to change that?
You are where you want to be, exactly, because your actions have showed me that you want to be here.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing anything substantial to work your way out of this situation. So you do want to be here. At least it looks like you want to be here.
Yeah.
So I posted that you are in control, and I had someone, a very thought-provoking individual, messaged me. She commented on that and messaged me and said, "Am I though?" And I know that knowing her, this was just her trying to formulate some thought, because she's a very insightful individual. And I said, yes. And the things you aren't in control of, I think you're in control of your response for. And she said, I agree with that. So you may not be, most of the things you can control, and those which you can't control, you can control how you respond to it.
Exactly.
And another thing that's kind of happened as I've gotten older is I feel like I've gotten better and better at responding a little bit more appropriately. Again, putting things in proper context. Yes. The dog. It is a dog. It's going to be tough. It's going to be emotional. You don't want to be critical over people who have difficulty dealing with that sort of thing, but you need to remember that your life will continue.
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah. That's the bottom line.
So what's on tap for you for this week? We talked about how you lost some weight, and I feel like we do this a lot, where we always review kind of the weekend review of your life, my life, what's going on. But I feel like lately we've kind of worked our way to doing this, and we need to continue this, is setting actionable steps, as Dr. Ryan likes to say, for the next week. Like you and I talked last week or a couple weeks ago about one of the things we're going to try to do is prioritize our happiness. And then we came back and said, hey, we followed through or we didn't follow through. This is what we tried to do. So I kind of think we should end our discussion a little bit with some talks about what we're going to do next week. So, like, what's on tap for you next week? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Do you have any short-term goals that you're looking at?
I would like to continue to progress losing weight. So I'm thinking 345.
And that's kind of what we've done in the past, is set little goal markers, say this by this week, this by this week, this by this week. And you're pretty much on pace to hit this week. We actually kind of had a little bit of a in-jest discussion.
Yeah.
But we set a goal you met the goal really early, and then we kind of said, wow, heck, maybe you should just readjust the goal.
Yeah.
But either way, you're going to meet one of the two.
Yeah.
So, which is obviously
the goal.
So just kind of progress to the next one. So that's good. Anything outside of the gym?
Yeah. I got a lot to do. A whole bunch to do for vacation. We're getting ready to leave. We'll be leaving next Saturday. So, cleaning and
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was coming up, but I forgot that it was that soon.
Yep.
Which kind of leads me to my goal, I guess, because you had wanted to do the Spartan race with me, but you were going to be on vacation, and now that serves as a reminder to me that that's coming up really, really quickly.
Yeah, buddy.
So I believe it is the 29th of
29th of August.
The reason I remember that is because school starts the 30th.
Oh.
So it's funny because when we set the date, I said to myself and the people that I'm running with or competing with, I said, man, that seems like it's pretty close to school. I hope that's not the Monday before we start. Not only because the exhaustive nature of the Spartan race, and I'll be absolutely annihilated the next morning, but also because we're traveling.
Yeah.
I believe...
Wasn't it in West Virginia somewhere?
Yeah, it's deeper West Virginia. I think it's over 4 or 5 hours away. Roughly 4 or 5 hours if memory serves. I looked it up briefly.
Right.
So, there's the traveling aspect, going to get home late. So I think that my goals are always to do the same stuff. So I guess a unique or a different goal that I would have, at least for the next couple of weeks, is continue to implement some different types of training, just kind of as a last second. You got the science test tomorrow. You got to stay up late and cram.
Yeah.
Just kind of cram some
session.
Different trainings in, which I have been doing progressively. I told you I've been running more. One thing that I've been working on the gym a lot lately. I try to get some every day, is some sort of grip training to train for the obstacles that you have to navigate around. So I would say that would be my goal for not only next week, but the next couple weeks. Goals that are outside the norm for me is just continuing to find ways to train a little bit differently that may better prepare me for the race. But at the end of the day, I'm really excited about it.
Oh, dude, I'm excited to hear about it. I can't wait to do one. Once we get to the point that we can pick one, I'm going to be even more excited because it's something that I've thought about a lot. And I don't know why I never thought it was doable.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, because I've done this whole thing where everything I thought about was I was going to do.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that, like, oh man, that's really cool. But I never really thought it was going to be doable. And now I'm thinking it's definitely doable.
So we set these goals, and I'd like to do one more at the end of our episodes here, at least for the short or the relatively short future. I was thinking about this the other day. I want to try to see if we can find new ways to become more engaging with the podcast.
Yes.
Not only with our listeners, like true engagement, like dialogue, but also in the sense of maybe promoting it more, getting it out to more people. Because initially, in the early stages, the first several months, even the first year, we were growing. Every month, we were getting hundreds of more listeners, and it was improving. Even if it was 25 or 50 extra listeners a month or downloads a month, we were still growing. Well, I feel like me personally, and I can't say how you feel or what your mentality is, but my mental approach to the podcast has been pretty lax and pretty complacent. So I enjoy doing it. And I love these discussions because it's thought-provoking for me. And that's kind of why we started this podcast in the first place, was you and I trying to learn a little bit more about success and how to navigate through it or navigate to it. But I feel like I don't put any thought into the podcast until the podcast. The only thing that I've been putting in lately as far as thought process goes to getting ready for it or preparing for it, or even afterwards, like putting it out to people and promoting it, the only thought process that I've undergone is scheduling.
Yeah.
So we figure out when we're going to meet, and that's it. And a lot of times the discussion that we have is about the training before or after.
Yeah.
So we will say, hey, what time do you want to do the podcast? We'll do it at 2 o'clock and we'll lift beforehand at 12 o'clock. Okay, so what are we going to lift? And then we talk about the training session more than the actual podcast.
Right.
And as you would assume, the amount of downloads that we have has completely leveled out. Now we're still consistently getting a couple hundred a month or whatever, but it's kind of plateaued. And I think that, like anything, if you have a weight loss plateau,
say with the theme of the breaking the plateau, it's breaking.
Yeah, that's everything that we do is aimed at that. Breaking the body weight plateau, breaking the strength plateau, breaking the financial plateau, breaking the relationship plateau. If your relationship gets stale, that's what we're all about.
Yes.
So I think that you and I need to find ways to continue to promote this and get it out to people, because I think that it could be beneficial for people.
I agree. That's why we're still doing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I don't ever want to stop, because I think the idea of two average guys telling people that they can accomplish their dreams and their ambitions, and then seeing, I don't want to say we're like crazy, like greatness, but I mean, like, seeing us actually do it.
Yeah, living proof that if you implement some of the strategies to become successful, it's going to work, because, and we can say, because you and I, if you go back 5 years ago, are both in significantly better positions than we were.
Absolutely.
So that's just something that I wanted to put out there is we, and I'm going to use the pronoun we because I'm going to include you in that. We are going to do a better job of kind of building this thing and getting it out to more people who could potentially need it in the future. All right, so with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 91. We appreciate you guys as always, and we look forward to talking with you next week. Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the